Ever wondered how badly damaged or vandalized stained glass gets repaired? Well, today's video is all about restoring this badly damaged stained glass window and transforming it back into this little beauty. All that good stuff coming up right now. The first stage in the care and repair of a damaged stained glass window is to create a number of rubbings of the lead matrix. These are a little bit like brass rubbings, where we put paper across the lead matrix and then we create a pattern of the original lead. This is very useful because it becomes a plan or a template we can use to then recreate the design once we have to make up the damaged areas that are missing. So I'm just using a little crayon here to create a rubbing. So as I say, I create about 3 versions of this because some of them will get destroyed during the making process, but some will be kept as an archive to remind us of what the original matrix looked like. The second stage is to trace the design out using the original rubbings as a template. So we're putting tracing paper across one version of the rubbing, and we're going to retrace the original lead lines in pencil to start with. Taking as much care as possible to replicate the original positioning of each lead piece. Stage 3 is drawing out the missing parts. Obviously there's a large section of damaged stained glass at the bottom of this panel which has to be recreated. So I've taken photographs of the adjacent windows and I'm reproducing the design to match in with the available designs that are adjacent to this damaged one. I'm using a Sharpie pen to create what is called a cartoon. This is essentially a line drawing showing me where each individual piece of glass is to be cut. Having created the outline of the design in a Sharpie pen, we then continue the design using a rubbing to give us an idea of how to fill in all of the details. Stage 4 is dismantling what remains of the lead matrix to the window, carefully dismantling it using pincers and knives to gently remove the glass from the lead matrix. Cleaning the glass as we go, removing remnants of cement which may be stuck to the edges of the glass. Again, you have to be extremely careful with this because a lot of the glass is very fragile and quite thin, so working slowly and carefully with this, making sure that we don't damage any additional pieces of painted glass. Health and safety is a big aspect of stained glass conservation, and the cement that is used, especially Victorian cement, very often contained red lead, and so it's toxic. Keeping the workplace clean at all times is very important. Stage 5, cutting new glass to match the missing damaged glass. Again, careful choice of colours is important to match in with the colour palette of the original Victorian window. I'm using a small light table, a little LED light table that I've placed underneath my tracing paper cartoon, and I'm cutting each shape out individually to match the shape of the design. Some glass types are quite dark and it's very difficult to see the original cartoon even with a LED light pad underneath, so we create paper templates like this, where we copy the design on tracing paper and cut the template out as a pattern. That pattern can then be placed on a dark piece of glass and used to very carefully cut the silhouette of the design out so that it fits into the cartoon when we place it back on the table. We're transferring the design up to our painting area, and stage 6 is selecting and mixing our paints. We're using a Debitus paint, which is a French paint. It's a particular hue of red, rouge number 4, which is ideal for reproducing the trace lines of this Victorian window. Stage 7 is redrawing some of the missing areas, again using what remains of the fragments as a clue to what, especially the drapery area here, what was contained in that drapery area. So using a little bit of creative license, we are recreating the folds in the drapery as closely as possible to match with what remains of the fragments of glass. Before mixing our paint with a little water. So the paint starts in a powder form and it's quite gritty and coarse, and it needs to be ground down with a little bit of water, as you can see here, to make it into a soft paste. And to this paste we add a binding agent. Now the binding agent I prefer to use is gum arabic, a liquid form of gum arabic. The gum arabic is very useful because it helps the paint to flow from the brush. It also helps the paint to stick to the surface of the glass before it gets fired. Using a bridge to lean on, we begin the painting of our first pieces of drapery. Other missing areas include a section of the inscription, so we choose our background glass carefully and begin to add painted details. Below the figures are missing areas of foliage, so there are some remnants which we can use as a clue to reproducing the painted foliage, as well as the decorative border areas here. With this border area, we're using a different type of paint rather than the rouge. It's now a bister brown paint, which is more of a chocolate brown colour to match in with the existing coloration of the borders. The original paintwork to this Victorian window is unstable in parts, which means that some of the paint is missing or flaking away. So we have to recreate those distressed painted effects using stippling and shading. Stage 9 is firing the glass in our kiln. I'm using my gas kiln, which has a quick turnaround. It comes up to temperature in about 15 to 20 minutes, and I can have a painted piece back in my hand in just over an hour. Checking to see that the coloration is working to my satisfaction. We continue the painting process until we've completed all of the missing pieces, and we assemble them on the light table just to check the light levels and the coloration works with the rest of the panel before moving on to the next stage. Stage 10 is lighting the window. We're using traditional lead cane, which is the same cross section as the original lead cane. This method of making traditional stained glass windows hasn't really changed for centuries. We use a few hand tools, some lead and some glass, some horseshoe nails to hold the panel in place. Stage 11 is checking the shaped head of the design using a template that we've taken on site to ensure that the shape is going to fit the original stonework. As you can see here, some of the shapes of glass are quite delicate, so it takes a lot of time to bend and manipulate the lead cane to fit the profile of each shape. Before assembling it into the overall design. Stage 12 is applying tallow flux. Now this is traditional flux which is used to bind the solder to the lead. It's an animal fat, very often sheep fat, but there are more contemporary fluxes available like water-based fluxes or pastes. Stage 13 is soldering the panel together. We're using 60-40 blowpipe solder and a little electric Weller soldering iron. Managing the fumes is very important. There are toxic fumes that come off of the soldering process, so wearing a P3 mask or an equivalent to a P3 mask is going to be important to protect you from those fumes. So we've soldered the first side together and having a look at it just to make sure that it is working properly. When we've soldered the first side and hold it up to the light, it's often the very first time we see the panel as a complete piece. Stage 14 is cementing the window. We're using traditional leaded light cement, which is a mixture of linseed oil and whiting, which is basically calcium carbonate, some blackening agents, and a few other drying ingredients. And it's brushed into the stained glass window and it squeezes the cement between the lead cane and the painted glass. and helps to strengthen the window and weatherproof it. It's a messy old job, but it works really well and it's a very stable outcome. Here I'm putting a little bit of chalk or calcium carbonate, which is often known as whiting, over the surface of the window, which helps to degrease it and remove a lot of the grease from the oils in the cement. A lot of elbow grease is also used to clean the window up, using a vacuum to get rid of excess whiting before leaving it for 24 hours to cure. Stage 15 is then cleaning the cement back off the window. This again is a slow process of simply brushing the window down and using small sticks or braddles to clean in between each individual piece of lead. Before giving the window a final polish. One thing I've learned about stained glass is no matter how hard you clean it, a stained glass window is never entirely clean. Stage 16 is re-glazing the stained glass window back into its original location. In the stonework is a groove into which the stained glass window is placed, and then we use traditional lime mortar to secure the window in place and to weatherproof it. Finally, we tie the window to the supporting saddle bars with small copper ties. And there we have it, our stained glass window restored and conserved and back in its original location to be enjoyed hopefully for another 150 years. And by the way, if you like the contents of my channel, please leave a like and subscribe, as it really does help us get this information out to as many people as possible. I'm on a mission to pass on the skills that I've learned over the last 40 years to the next generation of stained glass creatives, and your help is really appreciated. So please leave comments and suggestions for future videos, subscribe, pass it on to as many people as you think might be interested, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.